In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
Lord Walter Fitzgerald sends us the following quote: Garrett Og, or Gerald the Younger Fitzgerald, the 11th Earl of Kildare, died in London on the 16th November 1585. His body was brought back to Ireland and interred in St. Brigid's Cathedral in Kildare, and he was known as the Wizard Earl on account of his practicing the black art, whereby he was enabled to transform himself into other shapes, either bird or beast, according to his choice. So notorious was his supernatural power that he became the terror of the countryside. I think we're in for a good one.
The Abracast. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Please note the explicit content indicator. This means that I use adult language. I do not speak in a humorless, public radio hushed monotone. I am excited and enthusiastic about the information that I present and the topics I discuss. You will hear ice rattle in my glass throughout the show. On the show, I joke about bodily functions, sex acts, religion, and politics. The topics may seem random or scattered through the back catalog. A list of show topics in chronological order is provided on the featured topic link at Advertise.com. If any of these issues might trigger you, this might not be the podcast for you, and I wish you good luck finding a show more to your liking. It's that time again. The music is low. The party is over. The fire is dying down, and all the ordinary people passed out long ago. Now we are the only ones left. Hey everybody, it's John. Thank you for tuning in. Just quick reminder that, hey, New Year's Eve is coming up, and the cops don't give a fuck about your Fifth Amendment rights when it comes to these fucking DUI checkpoints. So don't be a dummy. Please, don't be a dummy. They are looking for you. They're looking for me. They are looking for us. With all that being said, I hope your holidays were great. This episode is going to be It's going to be ghost stories, because that's what people used to do back in the day, like the Victorian era. It was ghost stories for the holidays. So that's what I thought that the last episode of the year should be a ghost story episode. That's what we're going to do. So, all right. So New Year's Eve, check. I say don't be dumb, but also have a good time, but don't be dumb doing it. Fucking party your ass off. I know, 2019 has been a shitty year for me. I've had all kinds of personal problems I've tried not to drag into the podcast, but it's been a fucking motherfucker of a year. So I'm going to party my ass off and try to get through to the other side and start a new one. So, please allow me to just send you all my just the best wishes for you, everybody, in the new year, and safe, and your fucking health, and your relationships. It should all be awesome. Because we don't have long. Look at me. This is not the... Okay, I gotta get my shit together. Yeah, so I hope everyone had a great holiday, and I hope everyone has a great, safe, with the cops not involved in you, New Year's to everybody. And we'll just do this now. If you would, grab your vessel of the art or whatever you got handy and just toast to my supporters. Thank you guys for being there. And thank you guys for supporting me. And here's to you, and here's to a long life and a happy one, a quick death and an easy one, a good girl and an honest one, and a cold pint and another one. Here's to you, my Patreon and Subscribe Star supporters. I thought that toast was appropriate for the episode. A quick programming note. On New Year's Day, which is, if I'm not fucking wrong, it's a Wednesday, which is our Thus Spake Zarathustra book club day. And this is going to be the last Lessons of Zarathustra episode. We finished the actual book last week, and this is the last of the lessons. It's going to be a jumbo fucking episode. I think it's going to be like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours long to get it over with. It's going to drop on New Year's Day. So when you guys are all fucking suffering through your hangovers and your fucking, you're coming out of your shrimp cocktail and cheese ball coma, you're getting ready to spend, the day with your in-laws or whatever the fuck you got to do. You want to take your mind off it. You want to hear the last little bit about the Overman. Tune in there. And I don't know if or what I'm going to replace Wednesday Book Club with, going into the new year. So that's that. So that's all the programming shit. It's all over now. Thank you guys very much. Let's get into these cool ghost stories. The featured book for the evening is True Irish Ghost Stories by... okay, well, I'm going to do this both ways. True Irish Ghost Stories by St. John D. Seymour and Harry N. L. Nigland, 1914. But I know because I grew up when Roger Moore was fucking James Bond. Roger Moore was my James Bond. And one of his aliases was St. John D. It was St. John Smythe. And I was like, what the fuck kind of name is that? So I had to look at it, and what it is in people are named St. John, but when they're named St. John, it's pronounced St. John, at least in the UK. I don't know. So True Irish Ghost Stories by St. John D. Seymour and Harry L. Nigland, 1914. Specifically, Chapter 9, The Legendary and Ancestral Ghosts. I think besides the Dixmont Mental Institution episode, we haven't really gotten into ghosts. That's weird. All right. So let's get to it. We start off we start off great with the Countess. I love it. His wife, the Countess, had long wished to see some proof of his skill. I mean, if it's his wife, how long does she need to wait to see proof of his skill? I'll tell you what, to change this guy's life. His wife's sitting around waiting to see proof of his skill. Spreader bar. It'll change your fucking life. He had frequently begged him to transform himself before her, but he had steadily refused to do so. Oh, they're talking about his gift, his ability to change into an animal. Okay, I'm sorry. Well, I guess the spreader bar thing, it still applies. He said if he did and she became afraid, he would be taken from her. And she would never see him again. Still, she persisted. And at last, he said he would do as she wished on the condition that should she first of all undergo 3 trials to test her courage. To this, she was willing. This whole conversation is like, yeah, it's about the spreader bar. In the first trial, the river Grease, which flows past the castle walls at a sign from the Earl, overflowed its banks and flooded the banqueting hall in which the Earl and the Countess were sitting. And she showed no sign of fear, and at the Earl's command the river receded to its normal course. And at the second trial, a huge eel-like monster appeared, which entered by one of the windows and crawled about among the furniture of the banqueting hall, and finally coiled itself around the body of the Countess. Well, I meant to do like a porno noise, but that was more like a Sanford and Son noise. Still, she showed no fear, and at a nod from the Earl, the animal uncoiled itself and disappeared. In the third test, an intimate friend of the Countess, long since dead, entered the room and, passing slowly by her, went out at the other end. She showed not the slightest sign of fear, and the Earl felt satisfied that he could place his fate in her keeping. But he again warned her of his danger if she lost her presence of mind while he was in another shape. And then he turned himself into a black bird, and he flew about the room and perched on the Countess's shoulder. And he commenced to sing, "Caw, caw." Suddenly a black cat appeared from under the chest and made a spring at the bird. And in an agony of fear for its safety, the Countess threw up her arms to protect it and swooped it away. When she came to, she was alone, and the bird and the cat had disappeared, and she had never seen the Earl again. It is said that he and his knights lie in an enchanted sleep with their horses beside them in a cave under the rath on the hill of the Mugla Mast, which stands as the crow flies 5 miles to the north of Kilkea Castle. Once in 7 years, they are allowed to issue forth, and they gallop around Karuga, thence across the country of the Kilkea Castle, where they re-enter the haunted wing, and they return to the Wrath of Mulgamast. The Earl is easily recognized as he's mounted on a white charger shod with silver shoes. When these shoes are worn out, the enchantment will be broken, and he will issue forth, drive the foes from Ireland, from the land, and reign for 7 times 7 number of years over vast estates of his ancestors. And shortly before 98, he was seen in the Kruga by the blacksmith, who was crossing it in an ass cart. Oh boy, here we go. From a place called Athgarvan to Kildare. A fairy blast overtook him, and he had just time to say, "God speed ye gentlemen to the invisible good people," when he heard horses galloping up behind him, pulling to one side of the road and looking back. And he was terrified at seeing a troop of knights, fully armed, led by one on a white horse. The leader halted his men, and riding up to the blacksmith, asked him to examine his shoes. Almost helpless from fear, he stumbled out of the ass cart. I just love that, the ass cart. And he looked at each shoe, which was of silver. Silver would be a poor choice for a horseshoe, I would imagine. And then he informed the knight that all the nails were sound, and the knight thanked him, rejoined his troop, and galloped off. The blacksmith, in a half-dazed state, hastened on to Kildare, where he entered the public house. He ordered a noggin of whiskey. Here, here, blacksmith, and to your ass cart also. And drank it neat. When he had thoroughly come to himself, he told the men that were present what had happened to him on the Karuga. And one old man who had listened to him said, by the mortal man, ye are after seeing Wizard Earl. This fully explained the mystery of Wizard Earl, or Earl Gerald, the name by which the Wizard Earl is known by the peasantry. One other legend is told in connection to the Wizard Earl. Of a considerably later date, it is said that a farmer was returning from a fair in Athy late one evening in the direction of Ballantor, when passing within view of the rath of the Mulga mast, he was astonished to see a bright light apparently issuing from it. Dismounting from his car, he went to investigate. On approaching the rath, he noticed that the light was proceeding from the cave in which were sleeping several men in armor. With their horses beside them, he cautiously crept up to the entrance, and seeing that neither man nor beast stirred, he grew bolder and entered the chamber. He then examined the saddlery on the horses and the armor of the men, and the plucking up the courage began slowly to draw a sword from its sheath. This dude's got some balls. As he did so, the owner's head began to rise, and he heard a voice in Irish say, "Is it the time yet come?" In terror, the farmer, as he shoved the sword back, replied, "No, it is not, your honor." And he fled from the place. It is said that if the farmer had only completely unsheathed the sword, the enchantment would have been broken, and the Earl would have come to his own again. In 1642, Walstown Castle, the seat of the Wall family in York Court, was burnt down by the Cromwellian troops. And Colonel Wall, the head of the family, was captured, and he was imprisoned in Cork jail, where he died. One of the defenders during the siege was a man named Henry Bennett, who was killed while fighting. His ghost was often seen about the place for years after his death. His dress was of a light color, and he wore a white hat, while in his hand he carried a pole, which he used to place across the road near the castle to stop travelers. On a polite request to remove the pole, he would withdraw it, laugh heartily. A caretaker in the place named Philip Cooligan used frequently to be visited by this apparition. He came generally about supper time. And while Cooligan and his wife were seated at the table, he would shove the pole through the window. Cooligan would beg him to go away. Take your pole out of my window and go away, and not interfere with the poor, hard-worked man. And the pole would then be withdrawn with a hearty laugh from the ghost. And in the parish church of Ardtria near Cookston, a marble monument and inscription in memory of the Thomas Meredith D.D., who had been a fellow of the Trinity College of Dublin, and for 6 years rector of the parish, and he died. according to the words on the inscription on 2nd May 1819, as a result of a sudden and awful visitation. A local legend explains this visitation by stating, that a ghost haunted the rectory, the visits of which had caused his family and his servants to leave the house. The rector had tried to shoot it, but it failed. You can't shoot a ghost. Oh. Then he was told to use a silver bullet, and he did so, and the next morning was found dead at his hall door, while a hideous object like a devil made horrid noises out of any window. And the servant man approached, and this man was advised by some Roman Catholic neighbors to get a priest who would lay the thing, quote, lay, unquote, L-A-Y, unquote, the thing. Wow. Was it a child? This priest arrived, and with the help of a jar of whiskey, the ghost became quiet and civil till the last glass in the jar, which the priest was about to empty out for himself, whereupon the ghost, or devil, made himself as thin and long as a low eel, and slipped himself into the jar to get the last of the drops. But the priest put the cork into the place and hammered it in. Wow. Psychological implications. And making the sign of the cross upon it, he had the evil thing secured, and it was buried in the cellar of the rectory, where on some nights it could still be heard calling to be let out. I think that priest had a drinking problem, and that's all this story is about. So I guess I'll toast to drinking problems. A story of a phantom rat, which comes from Limerick, is only one of many which show the popular Irish belief in hauntings by various animals. Many years ago, the legend runs, a young man was making frantic and unacceptable love to a girl. Spreader bar. That's what I'm saying, bros. At last, one day when he was following her in the street, she turned on him and pointed to a rat which some boys had just killed and said, I'd as soon marry that rat as you. And he took her cruel words so much to heart that he pined away and he died. After his death, the girl was haunted at night by a rat. And in spite of the constant watch of her mother and her sister, she was more than once bitten. The priest was called and could do nothing. So she determined to immigrate. A coasting vessel was about to start for Queenstown, and her friends, collecting what money they could, managed to get her on board. The ship had just cast off of the quay when shouts and screams were heard up on the streets, and the crowd scattered, and a huge rat with fiery eyes galloped to the quay, and it sat upon the edge screaming hate, sprang off, and did not reappear. And after that, we are told the girl was never again haunted. So take that at face value. We needed a lighthearted episode, I think, my friends. I think that we deserve a lighthearted episode. A legend of the Tyrewali I'm going to have to say that a bunch of times. I mean, it's right here again in like two. Okay. A legend of the Tyrewali family relates how former Lord Tyrewali, who was a very wild and reckless man, was taken from this world one evening. It is said, just as the nobleman was preparing for a night's carouse, a carriage drove up to his door, and a stranger asked to see him, and after a long private conversation drove away as mysteriously as he had come. Whatever words had passed, they had a wonderful effect on the gay lord. I know laughing at that is inappropriate. For his ways were immediately changed, and he lived the life of a reformed man. As times went on, the effect of whatever awful warning the mysterious visitor had given him wore off, and he began to live a life even more wild and reckless than before. I got a toast to that, right? On the anniversary of the visit, he was anxious and gloomy, but he tried to make light of it. The day passed, and the night there was high revelry in the banqueting hall. Outside it was wet and stormy. When just before midnight the sounds of wheels was heard in the courtyard, all the riot stopped. The servants opened the doors in fear and trembling, and outside stood a huge dark coach with 4 black horses. This fearful guest entered and beckoned to Lord Triwally, who followed him to the room off the hall. The friends, sobered by fear, saw through the door and the stranger drawing a ship on the wall. A piece of the wall then detached itself, and the ship grew solid, and the stranger climbed onto it, and Lord Triwally followed without a struggle. The vessel then sailed away into the night, and neither it nor the occupants were ever seen again. So I was trying to fight the urge to say, come sail away with me. But obviously I couldn't resist. All right, let's do one more, and then we're going to take a break. The above tale is a good example of how a legend will rise superior to the ordinary humdrum facts of life. For it strikes us once that the gloomy spectre went to unnecessary trouble in constructing a ship, even though the task proved so simple to his gifted hands. But the coach was at the door, and surely it would have been less troublesome to have used it. A strange legend is told of a house by Boyone Valley. It is said that the occupant of the guest chamber was always wakened on the first night of his visit. Then he would see a pale light in the shadow of a skeleton climbing the wall like a huge spider. It used to crawl out on the ceiling. God, that's weird. And when it reached the middle, it would materialize to apparent bones holding on by its hands and its feet. And then it would break into pieces, first the skull, and then the other bones would fall to the floor, and one person had the courage to get up and try to seize a bone, but its hand passed through to the carpet. Through the heap was visible for a few seconds. And I think this is where we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take our break right here. Note to
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I like coffee, bonfires, walks on the beach, old books. But you know what I really like? The paranormal. Strange stories and experiences, psychic phenomena. So, if you're interested, come join me and read an open mind and a healthy dose of skepticism. And we'll see what happens.
The following story can hardly be called legendary, though it may certainly be termed ancestral. The writer's name is not given, but he is described as a rector of the rural dean in the late established Church of Ireland and a justice of the peace for 2 counties. It has this added interest in that it was told to the Queen Victoria by the Marconius of Ely. By the way, that Immortal Hour podcast that's starting up is a great friend, and she's a supporter of this show. She's starting her own podcast, Lisa. So if you are interested in this podcast, go find her shit, because it's going to be awesome. And it's just starting. You can get it on the ground floor, as they say in corporate America. All right, but back to this book. Loftus Hall in County. She's actually been on this episode. We did an episode, the Dionysus episode that we did. She was on it. So, anyhow, back to it. The Loftus Hall in County Wexford was built on the site of the stronghold erected by Raymond, one of Strongbow's followers. His descendants forfeited in 1641, and the property subsequently fell into the hands of the Loftus family, one of whom built the house and other buildings about the middle of the 18th century. There lived at Loftus Hall Charles Tottenham, a member of the Irish Parliament, known to fame as Tottenham in his boots, owing his historic ride to the Irish capital in order to give a casting vote in a motion which saved £80,000 to the Irish Treasury. The second son, Charles Tottenham, had 2 daughters, Elizabeth and Anne, to the later of whom the story relates he came to live at Loftus Hall, in the old baronial residence of the family, with his second wife and the 2 above-mentioned daughters. Of his first wife, Loftus Hall is an old rambling mansion with no pretense of beauty, passages that led nowhere, large dreary rooms, small closets, various unnecessary nooks and corners, paneled or wainscoted walls, and a tapestry chamber. Here resided, at the time my story commences, Charles Tottenham, his second wife, and his daughter Anne, Elizabeth, his second daughter. Having been married, the father was a cold and austere man. The stepmother, such as that unamiable relationship is generally represented to be. What and how great state of lonely solitude and depression of mind of poor Anne must have been in such a place without neighbors or without any home sympathy may easily be imagined. Here we go. One wet and stormy night, they sat in a large drawing room They were startled by a loud knocking at the outer gate. Knocking at the door. A most surprising and unusual occurrence. Presently, the servant announced that a young gentleman on horseback was there requesting lodging and shelter. He had lost his way and his horse was knocked up. I wonder if that means it was pregnant. I mean, that's what you would think, right? How old is that term? And he had been guided by the only light which he had seen. The stranger was admitted and refreshed and proved himself to be an agreeable companion and a finished gentleman, far too agreeable for the lone scion of the house of Tottenham. For a sad and mournful tale follows, one whose strange result continues almost to the present day. Well, let's see. Does anyone want to guess where this goes? I'm like, an agreeable stranger on a knocked up horse and a daughter of a barony? I could be wrong. I haven't read this yet. Much mystery has been involved. The story at the present point. In truth, the matter was left in much silence and obscurity. That but for the acts of her who was the chief sufferer in it. Through several generations, nothing would be known. The fact, I believe, which was not unnatural under the circumstance, that this lonely girl formed a strong attachment to this gallant youth. No, that's Sanford and Son again. Fuck. Chance had brought to her door, which was warmly returned. The father was his stern nature, and the wife was no solace, as she was the stepmother. It is only an instance in the refrain of the old ballad. He loved and he rode away, and he had youth and friends, the stirring scenes, and soon forgot his passing attachment. Poor Anne's reasons gave way. The fact is but too true. She became a confirmed maniac. And he had to be confined for the rest of her life in the tapestried chambers before mentioned, in which she died. A strange legend at once invented to account for this calamity. It tells how the horseman proved such an agreeable acquisition that he was invited to remain some days and made himself quite at home. Well, obviously. And as they were now 4 in number, was proposed in the evening. The stranger, however, with Anne as his partner, invariably won every point, and the old couple never had the smallest success. One night when poor Anne was in great delight at winning so consistently, she dropped a ring on the floor and suddenly diving under the table to recover it, was terrified to see that her agreeable partner had unmistakably cloven foot. Her screams made him aware of her discovery, and he at once vanished in a thunderclap, leaving a brimstone smell behind him, and the poor girl never recovered from the shock, lapsed from one fit into another, and was carried to the tapestry room, from which she never came forth alive. The story of his satanic magistry got abroad, and many tales were told of how he continued to disturb the house. The noises, the apparitions, the disturbances were innumerable, and greatly distressed old Charlie Tottenham, his wife, his servants, it is said that they finally determined to call in the services of their parish priest, a Father Broaders, who, armed with all the exorcisms of the church, succeeded in confining the operation of the evil spirit into one room, the tapestry room. Here then, God, listen to this. I mean, just think about it. So they're like, okay, we gotta do something about this devil, this demon. So they call him this exorcist. And when we know about exorcists, they come in and they go, by the power of Christ, they compels you. By the power of Christ, they compels you. But the power of Christ can't win. It can only box this fucking thing up into one room. What does that fucking say? I mean, we really need to think about this. I mean, we don't. You, maybe. Whatever. Nothing matters. Here, then, we have traced from the date of the unhappy girl's misfortune that the house was disturbed by something supernatural, and that the family sought the aid of the parish priest to abate it. But further ahead, the tapestry room was the scene of this visitation, but the matter was kept dark. All reference to poor Anne was avoided. And the belief was allowed to go abroad that it was Satan himself who disturbed the peace of the family, and her parents were ready to turn aside the keen edge of observation from her fate, preferring rather that it should be believed that she were haunted by the devil, so that the story of her wrongs would seek into oblivion and be classed as old wives' tales of horns and hooves, with harsh father and stepmother have long gone to the place appointed for all living. The loftiest branch of the family are in possession of the hall, yet poor Anne has kept her tapestried chamber by nearly the same means by which compelled her parents to call in the aid of the parish priest so long ago. But to my tale, about the end of the last century, my father was invited by Mrs. Tottenham to meet a large party at the hall. And he rode, as was then a custom in Ireland, with his pistols and his holsters, and arriving he found a house full. And Miss Tottenham apologized to him for being obliged to assign him to a tapestry chamber for the night, which, however, he gladly accepted, never having heard of the stories connecting to the tapestry chamber. However, he secretly covered himself in the bed when suddenly something heavy leaped upon it, growling like a dog, and curtains were torn back and the clothes stripped from the bed. Supposing that some of his companions were playing tricks, he called out that he would shoot motherfuckers, and seizing a pistol, he fired up the chimney, right up Main Street, lest when he would wound one of them. He then struck a light and searched the room diligently and found no sign or mark of anyone. And the door locked, and he had left it on, retiring to rest. The next day he informed his host how he had been annoyed, but they could only say that they would not have put him in that room if they had any other to offer him. They didn't know that this motherfucker was shooting in the house. Years passed on, and the Marquis of Ely went to the hall to spend some time there. His valet was put to sleep in the tapestry chamber in the middle of the night. The whole family was aroused by this dreadful roars and screams, and he was found lying in another room in mortal terror. After some time, He told them that soon after he had lain himself down in bed, he was startled by the rattling of the curtains, and they were torn back, and looked up. He saw a tall lady by the bedside dressed in a stiff brocaded silk, whereupon he rushed out of the room screaming with terror. Years afterwards, I was brought by my father with the rest of the family to the hall for a summer bathing. Okay. Attracted by the quaint look of the tapestry, I at once chose it for my bedroom. Being utterly ignorant of the stories connecting with it, for some little time, nothing out of the way happened. One night, however, I sat up much later than the usual to finish an article in a magazine I was reading. The full moon was shining clearly in through two large windows, making all as clear as day, and I was just about to get into the bed, and, happening to glance towards the door, to my great surprise, I saw it open quickly and noisily. Bum, bum, bam, bam. And as quickly and noiselessly shut again, while the tall figure of a lady in a stiff dress passed slowly through the room to one of the curious closets already mentioned. It was the opposite corner. I rubbed my eyes. Every possible explanation but the true one occurred to my mind. The idea of a ghost did not for a moment enter my head. I quickly reasoned myself into a sound sleep, and I forgot the matter. I don't know how you can reason yourself into the sleep. The idea that some weird chick in a weird dress is sleeping in your closet while you're trying to get to sleep, or hanging out in your closet while you're trying to get to sleep. The next night, I again sat up late in my bedroom preparing a gun and ammunition to go and shoot seabirds early in the morning, when the door opened again and shut the same noiseless manner. The same tall lady proceeded to cross the room quietly and deliberately as before toward the closet, and I instantly rushed her. Get her, Ray! Get her! And I threw my right arm around her, exclaiming, "Ha! I have you now!" To my astonishment, my arm passed through her and came with a thud against the bedpost, at which spot she then was. The figure quickened pace, and as it passed, the skirt of the dress lapped against the curtains, and I marked distinctly the pattern of her gown, a stiff brocaded silk. The ghost solution of my problem did not yet enter my mind. However, I told the story at breakfast the next morning, and my father, who had himself suffered from the lady's visit so long before, never said a word, and it passed as some folly of mine. So slight was the impression it made on me at the time that I thought I slept many a night after in the room, and never thought of watching or looking out for anything. Years later, I was again a guest at the hall. The Marquis of Ely and his family, with a large amount of servants, filled the house to overflowing, and I passed the housekeeper's room, and I heard the valet say, "What, I too sleep in the tapestry chamber? Never. And I will leave my Lord's service before I sleep there." At once my former experience in that room flashed upon my mind. I had never thought of it during the interval. I was still utterly ignorant of Anne Tottenham. So when the housekeeper was gone, I spoke to the valet, and I said, "Tell me why you will not sleep in this tapestry room, as I have a particular reason for asking." He said, "It is possible that you do not know that Miss Tottenheim passes through that room every night and dressed in a stiff, flowered silk dress, enters the closet in the corner? I replied that I never heard a word of this until now, but that I had, a few years before, twice seen a figure exactly what he had described, and passing my arm through her body. Yes, he said, that was Miss Tottenheim, and as is well known, she was confined mad in that room and died there, and they say was buried in that closet. Time worn on, and another generation arose. Another owner possessed the property, and a grandson of my friend in the year 1850-something, he being then a child, came with his mother, the Marchioness of Ely, and his tutor, the Reverend Charles Dale, to the hall of the bathing season. This is all a mystery to me, what this bathing business is. Mr. Dale was no imaginative person, a solid, steady, high-educated English clergyman who had never heard the name Miss Tottenheim. The tapestry room was his bedchamber. And one day, in late autumn of that year, I received a letter from the uncle of the Marquis, saying, "Do tell me what it is you saw so long ago in that tapestry chamber, for something strange must have happened to Reverend Charles Dale." As he came to breakfast, quite mystified, something very strange must have occurred. But he will not tell us, and he seems quite nervous and, in short, is determined to give up his tutorship to return to England. Every year something mysterious has happened to any person who has slept in that room, but they always keep it close. Mr. D., a Wexford gentleman, slept there a short while ago and had a splendid dressing case fitted with gold and silver articles, which he left carefully locked up on his table at night. In the morning, he found the whole of its contents scattered about the room. Upon hearing this, I determined to write Reverend Charles Dale, then the incumbent of the parish near Dover, telling him what had occurred to myself in the room, and the evidence of supernatural appearances there were so strong were continued several generations that I was anxious to put them together, and I would consider it a great favor if he would tell me if anything had happened to him in that room, and of what nature. He then, for the first time, mentioned the matter, and from his letter, now before me, make the following extracts. For 3 weeks, I experienced no inconvenience from the lady, but one night, just before we were about to leave, I had sat up very late. It was just about 1 o'clock when I retired to my bedroom, a very beautiful moonlight night, and I locked my door, and I saw that my shutters were properly fashioned, as I did every night, and I had not lain myself down for more than about 5 minutes before something jumped on the bed, making a growling noise. The bedclothes were pulled off, though I strongly resisted the pull. I immediately sprang out of the bed, lighted my candle, and looked to the closet and under my bed, but I saw nothing. Mr. Dale goes on to say that he endeavored to account for it in some such a way as I had formerly done, having never up to the time heard one word of the lady and her doings in that room. And he adds, I did not see the lady or hear any noise but the growling. Here then is the written testimony of the beneficiated English clergyman occupying the responsible position of tutor to the young Maki of Eli, the most sober-minded and unimpressionable man. He repeats in 1867 almost every word of my father when detailing his experience in that room in 1790, a man of whose existence he had never been cognizant, and therefore utterly ignorant of Miss Tottenham's doing in the room nearly 80 years before. In the autumn of 1868, I was again in the locality of Dunmore, the opposite side of the Waterford estuary. I went across to see the old place, and what altercations Miss Tottenham had forced the proprietors to make in the tapestry chamber. I found that the closet to which the poor lady had always vanished was taken away, the room enlarged, and 2 additional windows put in. The old tapestry had gone, and a billiard table occupied the site of poor Anne's bed. I took the old housekeeper outside, and I asked her to tell me how Miss Tottenham bore these changes in her apartment, and she looked quite frightened and mostly anxious to avoid the question, but at last hurriedly replied, "Oh, Master George, don't talk about her. Last night she made a horrid noise, knocking the billiard balls about." I have thus traced with strict accuracy the most real and true tale from the days of Tottenham and his boots to those of his great-grandson. Loftus Hall has since been wholly rebuilt, and I have not heard whether poor Anne Tottenham has condescended to visit it, or is wholly banished at last.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
Hey guys, if you're still here, I just want to reiterate with you the importance of being smart for New Year's. They are after you. They are after me. They are after us all. And also, the other side of it is, you know, us getting into the new year and being like, yo, we could put all that shit from the old year behind us. That's what I'm looking forward to. So thank you guys for hanging in. Thank you for listening. And thank you, seriously, thank you for listening. Have a good New Year, guys. While I share the show for free, most things involved with making it are not free. There are hard costs tied to making each episode that I largely pay for out of my pockets. The costs include hosting the website, storing the audio files you listen to, and maintaining and upgrading microphones, cables, soundboards, and other recording equipment which wear out over time. It's always surprising when I look at the list of costs involved in making something, quote, free, unquote. How can you help? Supporting me is a way for you to be a part of what I create and ensure its growth and sustainability. It also means that I can create the normal schedule of shows and bonus shows, as well as the exclusive Fellow Craft episodes by supporting the show. You're not only a fan and a listener, but you are part of helping bring the shows to life and helping to drag these topics into the light. You supporting the show gives me a way to offer fun rewards as a thank you for showing your appreciation and your support of my projects. I have an idea for a reward that you don't see? Let me know. Supporters are partners, and I obviously am somewhat open-minded. I currently pay for you to listen to the show. Not only do I pay the hosting bills out of my own pockets, I volunteer time and talent to our shows. Talent and time that I pay for mostly from my own pocket. What are you supporting? You are supporting the show. The price of books, the time and resources of reading and researching, not to mention the massive amounts of gin and tonic we need to make the gin jihads consumed during production of the show. You're also supporting the equipment it takes to record the show. My voiceover actress, the guy who designs my audio drones, and the time and resources it takes to create the bonus material, and the cost to maintain the internet presence. Is it worth your support? Hey, I'm proud of what I make, and I feel like I am improving by leaps and bounds all the time. In addition to creating the shows that I and you love and are excited about, I have a full-time commitment and other obligations. But why financial support? Our supporters can help me focus time on the quality and development of the podcasts, and also create the opportunity to reward the people who give their time and talent. Thank you. We can't put into words how much it means for me that you listen to the show each time I post a new episode. Your feedback, support, and your love of the stories that I tell are what keeps me going. But I can't afford $3 a month. There are many degrees of support, but if you can't support the show financially, please consider leaving a rate and review on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget to sign on to the mailing list and unlock a lot of bonus content. The Abercast is a podcast that investigates the occult, forgotten stories of history and conspiracy theories. We look for unique ways to look and to attack these topics that are often dark, and we like to add context and levity.